you very much for coming today. I know that you're all taking a chance on the weather, but I think it will be fine. I've been assured by the weathermen, and you know that they're always right? So we should be good for this, and chocolate's always a good reason to risk it anyway. So hopefully that would be worth the time. Thank you all for coming. I do want to let you know that next month we are having an author come speak. Dana Owen, he's the author of Shotgun. He was a police officer in Massachusetts who got shot in the head and then recovered to track down his shooters. So he wrote a book about that. He's going to come next month to speak about that. So watch for that date. It will be sometime towards the end of the month on a Saturday.
Is that what you call Meet the Cops?
Yeah. No.
No, that's not the same one?
No, it's not the same thing. No, that's a different thing where we're actually meeting local police officers.
Yeah.
So that'll be coming up soon. I'm not sure about the date on that. But this is our program for today. Mike Cross is a department chair of the natural sciences at the Northern Essex Community College, and he's brought to us today by the Northern Essex Community College Speakers Bureau. So we thank them for their setting up of these speakers, which are always good. He has a PhD in organic chemistry, and he teaches chemistry or forensic science at the NECC. So he's going to talk to us today about chocolate.
Perfect. Thanks, Amy. All right. Thanks again for having me, and thanks to all of you for coming out today. So how many of you like chocolate? Chocoholics? Okay, there's probably a reason you're here, right? Okay, how many of you like dark chocolate? Okay. Milk chocolate? Okay. White chocolate? Any chocolate? Okay, good. So I'm going to get the bad news out of the way first, that white chocolate isn't chocolate at all, technically. And it's actually just the cocoa butter, the fat from the cocoa beans, but it contains no cocoa itself, so not true chocolate. But, when I talk about the health benefits of chocolate, mostly dark chocolate, to a lesser extent milk chocolate, and unfortunately not to white chocolate at all. But if at the end of the day you decide you need to get rid of all your white chocolate, let me know. I will find a very good home for it. I have 3 young kids, and they love chocolate too. So today I thought we'd go ahead and talk a little bit about all different sides of chocolate. If you, like me, grew up loving chocolate, you were probably told, on one hand, that chocolate's really bad for you, right? It rots your teeth, it makes you gain weight, all these different problems. Nowadays, we're told that chocolate is like a superfood, right? That there's like 2 different sides, and you should eat as much as possible. So, the idea is that hopefully today, if we do this right, we should be able to actually bring these 2 things together so that really we'll see the full side of chocolate. I mean, you try to spend these $2 bills at Market Basket, they don't believe they're real, right? And so it's like, why would I forge $2 bills? So instead you have to break them back down. Well, hopefully we'll see. So hopefully we'll see both sides of this today. No, but if you hand me a $100 bill, I can make it disappear. So. All right, so before we get into the health benefits of chocolate, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the history of chocolate, right? Just a quick overview of what it is. So this is a cocoa tree, a cocoa pod. The Latin name for this is Theobroma cacao, which literally means food of the gods. So someone knew what they were talking about when they named this thing. And if you were to split open one of these cocoa pods, you'd find a whole bunch of these little cocoa beans inside. And these are edible. You can break them open and eat them. They're very, very bitter if you've ever tried one. And these have been around for many, many years. In fact, the earliest recorded use we have of the cocoa beans themselves is about 1900 BC. The Mackay and the Olmec actually used this. But they didn't use chocolate in the sense that we use chocolate, right? No Cadbury cream eggs, no Hershey bars. Instead, they would actually take these beans and they would crush them and they'd brew a drink out of it. You think, oh, it's kind of like coffee, right? Well, not quite, because first it was cold brewed, right? So you drink it cold. Second, they'd add a lot of chili powder to it, a lot of like allspice and different flavors that we normally don't associate with chocolate. But they used this. The Maya actually came along a little later. They also used the cocoa beans. They would also use it as currency. So it was a pretty good exchange rate. 3 cocoa beans would get you an avocado. You can make a little guacamole. And about 100 of them would actually get you a turkey, which growing up in the deserts of Utah, I thought this was a pretty good deal, right? Until I moved out here about 6 years ago with my family and realized that turkeys just grow out of the ground, like naturally. They're like in my yard, and I'm out there on Thanksgiving Day, like, get in the bag, right? So the Maya also believed that chocolate symbolized life and fertility. And so every marriage ceremony would actually involve the lucky bride and groom drinking from the same cup of cocoa. They would exchange cocoa pods. So pretty nice, right? Just got like 13 toasters at my reception. So this is kind of a nice idea. The Aztecs come in a little bit later. And the Aztecs actually used chocolate or cocoa beans as currency as well. They would collect it as tribute or taxes from the people they had conquered. This is the other type of Aztec money, which is actually just thin sheets of bronze that they had actually processed with arsenic. So I'd much rather carry around a few cocoa beans in a pouch than something like this that's going to kill you. The Aztecs believed that Quetzalcoatl actually brought the first cocoa tree from paradise and planted it here on Earth. And Montezuma actually believed that that chocolate had aphrodisiac properties and would drink like a dozen cups a day, right? So this idea of chocolate and romance goes back quite a ways, even back to the Maya with their marriage ceremonies. Now, how did we get chocolate? Well, thanks to Christopher Columbus and Cortez. They, came here to the, New World and quote-unquote discovered it, right? And then they took chocolate back to the royalty in Spain, and they weren't terribly impressed. They thought, well, why would anyone drink this stuff on purpose, right? It's not, it's bitter, it's strong, it's not terribly tasty, until someone had the brilliant idea that, wait a minute, we could actually leave out the chili powder and put in things like vanilla and sugar. And lo and behold, now it's this sweet, delicious thing, and everyone starts, drinking cocoa. And it's suddenly part of marriage dowries and all kinds of things. So dark chocolate obviously came along first, and then milk chocolate came along a little later. And then in about 1930, Nestle invented white chocolate. So for those of you who like white chocolate as well. Now, chocolate, we use it everywhere and all the time nowadays, right? If you were like me, you grew up wanting to be an astronaut just so that you could float around in space and eat M&Ms, right? Turns out that every Russian and American space voyage has involved chocolate, which is pretty impressive considering that it actually costs about $10,000 per pound of stuff that you shoot into space. That's some mighty expensive M&Ms there, but you can see it's definitely worth it. The Hershey's Company was actually awarded the Army-Navy E-Production Award 5 different times for their contributions to the war effort because they made about 3 billion of these little D-ration bars that they would put into every soldier's emergency ration kit. Now, a couple of problems with this. One is that it had to be specially designed not to melt in the heat, right? Yeah, exactly. With chocolate that doesn't melt, doesn't sound terribly good. They also didn't want the soldiers to sneak in and eat it just for fun, and so they actually designed it so that it tasted about as good as a boiled potato. So really not the best thing. This one's a reproduction that's filled with Bondo, so it's probably about the same flavor. You want to try it out. Let's see. Chocolate is in our literature, right? It's in our TV. It's all over the media. It's all over the place. And also, chocolate invented the microwave, which is pretty nice, right? A little help from an engineer by the name of Percy Spencer, who, like most of us, carries around a chocolate bar in his pocket, right? Who doesn't? And as he was working on the magnetrons that they were using for radar, he actually walked into the room where these magnetrons were on, and suddenly the chocolate bar in his pocket just melts, right? His first thought was probably, I need a new shirt. And his second thought was, maybe we could actually use these magnetrons to cook food. And lo and behold, the microwave is born, right? I've heard that Raytheon actually has one of the first, radar ranges in their lobby, and you can go and get a picture, a selfie, you and, chocolate in the microwave. So, chocolate's now everywhere. So a quick pop quiz for you guys. Who do you think eats more chocolate, men or women? You're like, I do. I volunteer as tribute. Women? Yeah, it turns out that, at least among those who admit it, in surveys of American men and women, I think it's 87% of men regularly eat chocolate and about 92% of women. So it's a pretty good percentage of the American population. Women just a little bit more. What about worldwide? Which country do you think eats the most chocolate? Belgium's up there, yeah. Germany is up there as well. Switzerland, yeah. So it turns out that the Swiss, they know their chocolate. So the Swiss actually eat about twice as much chocolate per capita as we do. Which we actually, in the U.S., we're number 10, so we need to up that a little bit so we can be number 1. Do my part. We actually eat about 11 pounds a year, so almost a pound a month of chocolate here in the U.S. Exactly. That's why it's an average, right? Some of us bring it up, some bring it down, and it all balances out in the middle. But the Swiss actually eat about twice that much, which you might think that that's a lot of chocolate, but it turns out that that's about 30 grams a day, which is, when we talk about the health benefits, a little foreshadowing here, 30 grams a day is actually what most doctors would recommend as a reasonable amount of chocolate. So that's a pretty decent amount. It's about 5 or 6 Hershey Kisses or a couple squares of Lindt chocolate if you like the Lindt stuff. It's about a third of a bar. That's a pretty good amount. I like the chili one because that way when my kids sneak in and try to get into my chocolate stash, it's like, they're burning. I'm like, don't eat my chocolate. So, why do we love chocolate, right? I mean, this is like my wife after a long day with the kids. I come home and she's like, just put the kids in bed, set down the chocolate. Nobody gets hurt. So why do we love chocolate so much? Well, there's a couple of reasons for this. I mean, one, it's delicious, right? But why is it so delicious to us? Well, we're genetically programmed to seek after sweet things, right? It gives us, calories. Calories keep us alive, so it makes sense that we go after things that give us calories. But second, anytime we eat sweets, it helps to produce endorphins. And endorphins make us feel good. We like to feel good, therefore we eat more sweets, right? But this happens anytime we eat any kind of sweets, not just chocolate. And yet many of us would gladly sit down and wolf down a whole bar of chocolate, but the idea of sitting down with like a cereal bowl of sugar and a spoon, this doesn't sound quite as appetizing, right? My 6-year-old would disagree, but for most of us, it's not exactly what we visualize as something that's tasty. So there must be something specifically in chocolate that's not in just, sugar. So what might that be? Well, actually, before I mention this, let's talk about holidays real quick. When you think of chocolate and holidays, what holidays do you think of? Valentine's Day is the big one, right? Easter, Halloween, Christmas, Tuesdays, right? It doesn't matter. Always a good reason for chocolate, right? But the one day that I'm told specifically that I need to make sure I bring home chocolate or I just shouldn't bother coming home at all is Valentine's Day, right? And so my wife usually says very sweetly, I love some chocolate, some roses, and some diamonds. And I teach at a community college, so she usually gets the first 2, which 2 out of 3 is not such a bad, score, right? But Valentine's Day, right, is the big day. And we've associated chocolate with romance for many, many, many years, ever since, the Maya. But I'm not sure if they have this here at the library, but Eat Chocolate Naked and 142 Other Ways to Attract Attention and Spark Romance. Much better than the sequel, which is Cook Bacon Naked. Really bad idea. I would probably avoid that one. But why is it that we often associate chocolate and love, right? I mean, it seems like a natural pairing. And again, this is not just clever marketing and advertising, which that's definitely part of it. But I mean, for years we've done this, right? This is a chocolate box from the 1930s in Western Germany. That's kind of something kind of special, right? You can see the lucky couple there. They're pretty excited. What was that?
From the 1930s?
Yeah, it's about 1932. Yeah, so it's pretty nice, right?
When I was born.
Wow. This could have been yours.
That's my birthday. My birthday present.
Oh, yeah. So, but, you'd fill this with chocolate and you'd give it to someone that you love, right? Something very, very special. And then you'd treasure this for a while. Even Whitman's used to make these nice little, tin treasure chests back in the, 1950s and so. So, again, something kind of special, which is,
Never thought of saving.
yeah, now you can sell them on eBay, right? But it's kind of sad that nowadays we actually often, we just pick up this cheap paper heart and then we, give it to someone and then they eat the chocolate, they throw it away, and it's just kind of, gone, right? So that's part of this is, whatever you do with your chocolate, whenever you enjoy it, eat it kind of slowly and indulge yourself a bit. But it turns out that there are a couple of chemicals in chocolate that are associated with romance. Kind of interesting, right? So I did put up the chemical structures there. It makes my heart go pitter-patter just a little bit. So I won't bore you with that too much. But oh, you do? Okay. All right. Good. So this one right here, this is tryptophan. I wanted to put this on my wedding cake. I don't know, but I got vetoed. So with this one, tryptophan, it's the raw material for serotonin. Serotonin is a chemical that's pumped out in our brains when we're in love with somebody, right? So we get this feeling of just kind of this warm, fuzzy feeling when we're deeply in love with someone. It's serotonin being pumped out in our brains. So it kind of makes sense that when we want someone to fall in love with us, we give them something that contains this, right? Because that way they start to associate those feelings with us. And it's like, oh, yeah, see, you feel good. That's me. You're in love, right? I think it really does work, though. I gave my wife chocolate on our second date, and a couple months later she asked me to marry her. And so, what can you say? But you probably heard of tryptophan before, right? Where have you heard about tryptophan? It's those turkeys again, right? Yeah. So it turns out that turkey has quite a bit of tryptophan in it. And, every Thanksgiving, gather around the table with my family. And my younger sister always says, oh, you see you're getting sleepy? That's the tryptophan talking. I always go like this because it turns out it's just an urban legend. It's actually just the fact that you ate a really carbohydrate-rich meal. My aunt, who's vegetarian, eats like the tofu turkey. You get the same effect, right? You eat too much, you get sleepy. Because tryptophan's in quite a few things. It's in chocolate, it's in ground beef, and yet you don't say, oh, I just ate this hamburger, I'm just dozing off, right? But if it's only tryptophan that we're trying to, secretly get into our special someone, to make them fall in love with us, then I should be able to show up on Valentine's Day with some red roses, half a pound of lean ground beef, right? I tried it and it doesn't work. So there must be something else to it besides just the tryptophan. Something else may be this chemical, PEA, or phenylethylamine. So PEA is a chemical that is pumped out in our brains when we just start to fall in love with someone, when we're attracted to somebody. And you get that kind of jittery, excited feeling, right? Like, oh, I can't wait till 6 o'clock, they get off work, we can go out, it's going to be great. So that's the PEA that's being produced. So again, it kind of makes sense that when we want someone to fall in love with us, we give them chocolate, right? And then what do we do when we break up with someone?
Eat chocolate.
We eat chocolate, right? I don't know about you, but it makes sense, right? Because, our brains are getting used to having these chemicals in our brains, right? And then suddenly we're no longer in love with someone, those levels start to go down. It kind of makes sense that we self-medicate, right? We try to get those chemicals back into our brains. Now, the levels are relatively low, so it's not like you hand someone a little Dove chocolate and suddenly they're madly in love with you, right? Although you could try it, it can't hurt. But so again, there may be some biochemical reasons why we associate chocolate with romance. Now, there is one more chemical that I do have to mention just briefly because it is in the media now and then where people will suddenly say chocolate is the same thing as marijuana. And then people get all upset about it and ban it from schools. Turns out it's not, okay? But the reason for this is this chemical here, anandamide, which comes from the Sanskrit word for bliss. And anandamide is a neurotransmitter. It's actually what's responsible for runner's high. You ever heard of this? I've never actually experienced it, but at some point when you exercise, it's supposed to feel good, right? And so then you're like, oh, you're running a marathon and you suddenly get this runner's high, right? This rush, and it makes you feel good, and so therefore you keep running. So that's actually the anandamide that's hitting this receptor in our brains and gives us this euphoric feeling. Chocolate actually contains this in some decent amounts, and so it makes sense that we would feel good when we consume chocolate. But it turns out that there is a chemical in marijuana, THC, right, that actually hits that same receptor. So that receptor in our brain that's looking for anandamide actually gets hit by this tetrahydrocannabinol, the THC, and that's what causes the high that's it's responsible for the high in marijuana. Again, two different chemicals, one that's naturally found in our brains and in chocolate, right? The other one that's found in marijuana. Experts say you'd probably have to eat about 25 pounds of chocolate in one sitting to get about the same effect as marijuana. So if you're eating 25 pounds of chocolate in one sitting, you've got other issues. I don't know what to tell you. But so now let's go ahead and look at some of the health benefits, right? Because we all love chocolate, and you're like, yeah, I know that because I eat it all the time, right? But there must be some reasons that it's okay to eat it, right? We want to feel good about this. And it turns out that there are some very good reasons. One is that chocolate is loaded with flavonols. So flavonols are a special class of chemical compounds known as antioxidants. Antioxidants help to fight free radicals, right? Free radicals are kind of like these little chemical terrorists that get into our cells, and they're highly reactive. They're produced anytime we metabolize food, anytime we breathe oxygen, right? Anytime we're alive, these chemicals will get in there, and they can damage our DNA. And if that's not repaired, it can lead to cancer, right? And so the idea is that if we flood our cells with antioxidants, then if a free radical comes into our cell and it has a choice between our DNA and an antioxidant, it'll always preferentially bind to the antioxidant. Okay? That destroys the antioxidant. It also destroys the free radical, and our DNA is still perfectly healthy, right? So to illustrate this, I need a volunteer. Does someone want to help me out? Oh, come on up. Perfect. I like the enthusiasm. All right. So what's your name?
Neela.
Neela? Hi, I'm Mike. Nice to meet you. I actually knew your name. I was just testing you. No, not really. Okay. So Neela, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start flipping through the deck. Whenever you say stop, that will be your card. Does that seem pretty fair?
Stop.
There? Okay. Can you see that card okay?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and show it to everybody else. And I'm just going to leave it right there in the deck just so that I don't mess with it. Now, I used to walk around with my eyes closed, but then my students would trip me, and then I feel bad. So let's see. So you saw your card? Are you okay with that? All right. So we're going to say that this deck of cards represents one of the cells in my body, okay? And that card in there that you chose is my DNA. So hopefully you chose a good one. But what happens is, this is a black light, and go ahead and just take that and just shine it on here for a minute. Yeah, just like rub it up and down on there. We'll try the back a little bit. Okay, perfect. Awesome. So by exposing this to ultraviolet light, we're getting some free radicals in there, and we're going to see if we can find your card in here, okay? So you just let me know if you see your card somewhere here. Let's see. Oh, wait, that was it?
Yeah.
So the 5 of hearts is pretty much destroyed now, right? And so it turns out that, my DNA has just been damaged by these free radicals, and so I should have actually eaten chocolate before I came in, because then it would have protected me, right?
Yeah, but how did it know?
That's a good question. Actually, if you take my chemistry class, I'll teach it to you. Okay? All right, thanks, Neela. Good job. All right, so it turns out that these antioxidants, these flavonols, are very good at protecting our cells, right? Now, here, this is a table of ORAC values. It's a little small, I apologize, but ORAC, or oxygen radical absorbance capacity, basically the higher the level, the better it is at fighting off these free radicals. Top of the list, black plums, extremely full of these flavonols. The problem is you eat too many black plums and you have other issues. So, moving on, we've got dark chocolate right up there, second on the list. So, extremely high in these flavonols. You'll notice that many of the top, foods are actually very brightly or darkly colored. So, black plums, dark chocolate, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, artichokes somehow got in there, right? I put artichoke hearts on my pizza. Now it's a health food. Bam, right? So let's see. And then if we keep going down the list, we hit things like pecans, strawberries, cherries, prunes, and then here we've got milk chocolate, right? So about a third of the amount that you'd find in a typical bar of dark chocolate, but still a pretty decent amount, about the same amount as grapefruit juice. So really not a bad choice, right? So if you're going for maximum health benefits, though, go as dark as possible with the dark chocolate. Or you could just eat 3 times as much milk chocolate, and that way... So these flavonols, though, are actually not only good for fighting off free radicals, but they also have some other pretty interesting health benefits. they actually have been shown to stimulate nitric oxide production, which opens up our blood vessels. That actually has been shown to lower blood pressure. There's an Italian study where they actually took men with high blood pressure and they fed the test group 100 grams of dark chocolate a day. That's a whole one of these bars every day, right? That's the kind of study I want to sign up for. Like, sorry, honey, got to take my medicine, you know. And they found that after only 2 weeks that the test group actually had lowered their blood pressure. So, kind of interesting. Good question. So, I don't think they mentioned the weight, but yeah, that is the dark side of dark chocolate, right? Where we have to worry about the calories. But you're ruining the ride here, you know? We got to focus on the good stuff. We'll actually talk about the negative aspects in just a minute. Because we definitely do have to worry about calorie content and fat content and so forth. Let's see. What else? Oh, these flavanols actually may reduce the risk of diabetes. It's been shown that dark chocolate can actually reduce insulin, the sensitivity and so forth. Now, not if you're eating that much, obviously. So, and because these flavanols help to open up blood vessels, it actually has been shown to improve vision temporarily. So you can't lose the glasses, unfortunately, but because it's increasing blood flow to the cornea, actually improves vision temporarily. And students who are fed chocolate before major cognitive tasks like exams actually perform better on those tasks. So Neela's like volunteering, right? And she's like, yes, give me chocolate before my next test.
Is that because of the caffeine content?
That is actually a really good question. So, 2 parts of that. One is that it's actually because it's increasing blood flow to the brain. And so if you get more blood into your brain, it helps you to function better, right? And think better. And the second thing is, what about the caffeine? Turns out chocolate doesn't contain caffeine. Yeah, it's just an urban legend. It actually goes back to years ago. There are a couple of compounds that are very, very similar, right? So, chocolate contains something called theobromine, where theobromine is like the chemical cousin of caffeine. Like it's a few atoms different, but in the world of like chemistry, a few atoms is a huge difference, right? And so chocolate actually, a huge bar of chocolate contains far less caffeine than a cup of decaf coffee. So you don't have to worry about the caffeine because if it is present, it's extremely low levels. Yes?
I was going to say, why did you say far less? If it doesn't have any.
Well, there may be trace amounts. It depends on, so studies will show that there may be trace amounts, but it's not enough to really be measurable.
And how does it improve the blood flow?
Oh, because those flavanols actually increase nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide is what signals the blood vessels to open up.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. No, good question. Oh, I'm glad. So caffeine, you've all experienced this, right? Where your energy level spikes and then you crash, right? Theobromine is more of just a low-level kind of buzz the entire time. So that's why many people can, drink like a cup of, or can eat chocolate before bed, but couldn't drink a cup of coffee before bed. So yeah, don't worry about the caffeine because it's just, if it is present, it's such minute amounts that you don't need to worry about it. But early studies didn't differentiate between the two. They're just like, oh, they're all xanthines. Okay, it's just, a bunch of caffeine. But no, it's actually theobromine. Let's see. And dark chocolate actually reduces the cravings for sweet, salty, and fatty foods. Probably because you just ate a bunch of dark chocolate. So you don't want anything else, right? But if you're going to indulge in something, it might as well be something with some health benefits, right? But there's more, right? It's like the ShamWow commercials, like bam, right? So it turns out that chocolate actually offers natural sun protection. So you go to the beach, a little Hershey syrup on there, you're good to go, right? No, actually, those flavanols, actually, once they're in your cells, they actually act as kind of an internal sunblock. So people who regularly eat chocolate actually sunburn more slowly than those who don't. So you should still always wear sunscreen, right? Because skin cancer is by far the most common form of cancer. But every little bit of protection helps, right? So eat a little bit of chocolate regularly. Chocolate also contains a natural cough suppressant, in case you feel a little hoarse. No? Okay. I'm just kidding. Actually, my wife always says, don't say it, don't say it. I always do, because it cracks me up. But the horse is actually there because chocolate is toxic to most other species, right? Dogs, cats, horses, and so forth. And it's because of that chemical that's a natural cough suppressant, the theobromine. So that chemical cousin of caffeine, the theobromine, actually does act as a natural cough suppressant. It's what's in some of those newfangled, like all organic natural cough drops. You could just suck on a piece of dark chocolate and get the same effect. But the theobromine can't be broken down by the livers of most species, and so it becomes toxic, right? The darker the chocolate, the more toxic it could be, right? Let's see, what else? Because it increases serotonin production, acts as a natural antidepressant, and it contains, quite a few essential minerals our bodies need, right? All from the humble bar of chocolate. So that seems like a pretty good deal, right? Except someone brought up that it's not all, like roses and chocolate, right? Instead, we also do have to worry about fat content, right? So obviously, chocolate does contain calories. It does contain fat. But even when we talk about the fat, it's actually not quite as bad as you might think. So there are actually 3 types of fat that are found in chocolate, right? In a good bar of chocolate, it's about a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 mix, right, of each of these fats. Oleic acid, same thing found in olive oil, right? Doctors always say cook with olive oil, just cook with chocolate. And you're golden, right? Make everything chocolate flavored. Anyone want scrambled eggs? Chocolate flavored scrambled eggs. Stearic acid, this is a saturated fat, but it's been shown to have neutral effects on cholesterol levels, heart disease risk, things like that. So it's adding in calories, but it's not upping your risk of like cardiovascular disease. And then palmitic acid or palm oil, that's the bad one, right? That's the one that ups your risk for all these different health problems. So, overall, 1/3 is actually healthy fat, 1/3 is neutral, and 1/3 is unhealthy. That's much better than sitting down with a plate full of bacon bits and just going to town, right? So if you're going to indulge in something, maybe chocolate's a pretty good choice, right? Now, I mentioned that this is about a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 mix in a good, bar of chocolate. If you look at the label on your chocolate and it says things like, that it's chocolate, cocoa butter, right? Then you're like, okay, that's pretty good, right? That's the good stuff. If it mentions that it has a bunch of partially hydrogenated vegetable oils and things like that, then that means that the manufacturer is actually taking out the cocoa butter, which has some of the healthy stuff in it, and they're selling that to skin cream manufacturers because all the skin creams nowadays are enriched with cocoa butter, right? And they make a bunch of money that way, and then they put in partially hydrogenated vegetable oils and other things in there that are cheaper, but that contain nothing but like the unhealthy fats. And so that's kind of a problem. One of the other reasons they do this is because it actually helps to lower the melting point. So if you want chocolate that melts really easily, like for fondue and so forth, you have to be careful because some of those will actually be really nasty fats mixed in with a little bit of cocoa just because it melts easily. Or like when you get ice cream and you get that magic shell. You ever seen that stuff? Yeah, and it like hardens as you pour it on there. Yeah, that stuff's loaded with some of the nasty fats. All right. So how do you eat responsibly, right? It's like the commercials, right? So, first things first, moderation in all things, right? I always worry that I'm going to give a talk like this and someone's going to go home and eat like 100 pounds a day and then they're going to sue me and say, you said chocolate was healthy for me. Okay, well, it is healthy in moderation. Most of these studies have shown that you reach maximum health benefits at about 30 grams a day, right? So again, that's about 1/3 of a Lindt bar or about 5 Hershey Kisses or about 3 or 4 of those Dove chocolates. So that's a pretty decent amount a day, right? You could increase it more than that, but then you're adding a bunch of calories and you've pretty much maxed out the health benefits at that point. So, and then obviously if you're going to be adding in extra chocolate, just because I said that it's good for you or whatever, then you should probably cut them out somewhere else, right? Cut out the calories somewhere else. And then go as dark as possible when you're eating chocolate, simply because the darker it is, the more flavonols there are. But really, it should still be like tasty. It shouldn't be like, oh, cod liver oil, oh, and dark chocolate, right?
Why do you have a picture of the periodic table and dark chocolate?
I am impressed that you recognize the periodic table. You should totally take my chemistry class. I put the periodic table on everything, okay? I carry it around in my wallet, right, just in case, because you never know, right? You get
shower curtain.
The shower curtain. Certain things in my house I'm not allowed. I have a periodic table like throw, blanket. But yeah, and my daughter's room might be covered in periodic tables and pictures of Marie Curie. But but this is really good because if you ever get pulled over for like speeding or whatever, and they say license and registration, you're just like, you don't need to see my license and registration. No, I'm just kidding. What was your question, Ela?
That's how I learned about it. In 4th grade, I was Mary Curie before.
Oh, that is brilliant. That is such a smart idea. So, let's see. What else? Oh, also one other kind of interesting thing about this is that you should actually avoid drinking a lot of milk when you are eating your chocolate if you're going for like maximum health benefits. And you might think, well, chocolate and milk, they naturally go together, right? Like chocolate chip cookies and a big glass of milk, or like a fudge brownie and a big scoop of vanilla ice cream on top, right? But it turns out that the milk protein, the casein in there, actually slows the absorption of the flavanols into the cells themselves. And so you're still consuming the same amount of flavanols, but you're only getting probably 85-90% of them absorbed that you normally would. Question?
What do you consider dark?
Good question. So, well, the darker the better, but most, let's see, I'm trying to remember the legal definitions. I think here in the US, I believe 11% cocoa solids is the minimum in order to be considered chocolate. If it's less than that, they have to say chocolatey or chocolate flavored. And then I think it's about 40% is considered dark, and then pretty much anything above that. Yeah. Personally, I go as dark as you can stand, right? Like I grew up only liking milk chocolate. But my wife lived in Germany for a while, and so she got me hooked on like the good Swiss chocolate. And so she started to slowly up the cocoa content a little bit. And before you know it, you're eating like 70%, and it's still really good, right? As you just kind of become accustomed to it. But they make like 80 and 99%, and to me that's like baking cocoa. It's like too chalky and strong. So really go as dark as you can, but that's still enjoyable for you. But that's a good question. I'm not exactly sure where the minimum is, but let's see. This one's 47%, and they consider this dark chocolate. So, yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
It sounds as if hot cocoa is not a good drink.
Oh, hot cocoa. Yeah, so that's a very good point. A lot of people are worried, like, wait, if I enjoy drinking my hot cocoa, and that's totally fine. It's just that you're not absorbing all of the flavanols. You're missing out on maybe 10% of what you would if you had like eaten the cocoa separate and then a couple hours later had the milk. Is it enough to worry about? Probably not, right? But if you're doing it just for like pure health benefits, you should sit there and eat like a square of like 99% baking cocoa and then drink your milk later. But honestly, I don't think it's enough to really worry about it. But just something to be aware of. Neela.
I thought chocolate had milk in it.
So most chocolates do, or at least this one will have like milk fat, but you're actually looking at the milk protein. So basically, it's just try to avoid a lot of dairy, like you're eating your yogurt. Actually, one thing that is delicious, though, is get like some Greek yogurt, a little bit of like cocoa powder in there, makes like a chocolate mousse. Delicious. So anyway, but yeah, so it sometimes does contain milk. It's not the end of the world. It's really not a big deal, but just kind of be aware of it. Yes?
Does higher percentage of dark chocolate mean there's less sugar?
It typically does, but not necessarily. It really kind of depends on the brand and so forth.
So is it the beans? Is it how the beans are processed that makes them really dark, or is it
most of it's just the amount of cocoa itself. So as you increase the amount of cocoa, you get like that stronger kind of bitter flavor. And so sometimes they'll cut it with sugar to try to make it a little sweeter. But in most cases, if you look at the content, depending on the brand and so forth, a lot of American chocolate, they sweeten it a little more because we like our stuff really sweet. A lot of other countries, it'll actually be a little more bitter because that's just how they prefer it. Yes.
What's the Dutch process? They say you shouldn't buy chocolate Dutch process.
Yeah, there's like this. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not an expert on like all the processing, but there's a lot of debate nowadays about if they do the Dutch alkali, which helps to break it down and so forth, and then they add emulsifiers and so forth. They claim that by heating it at certain temperatures, that it will break down some of those flavanols. And so the idea is that they can do things like cold press and so forth, and cold milling, and they've got these little ball bearings that grind it up and so forth. Is it enough to worry about? I've never really seen anything that says definitively that it's worth the added cost of some of the other fancy processing. But I don't know. I mean, it may be that someday they're going to say like, oh yeah, definitely it destroys a bunch of the flavanols. I don't think it does because most of these studies don't use any fancy processing. So yeah, I don't really worry about it. What I worry about a little bit more has to do with the the sourcing of the cocoa itself, and that's a big issue right now. Is that most of the big manufacturers don't know where they're getting their cocoa from because they buy it from a distributor who buys it from a bunch of smaller distributors who buy it from plantations where there may be child labor or slave labor involved with the harvesting. There are some companies like Tassa Chocolates who they actually source theirs because they're a small enough company that they can actually see where they get it from. But you do pay a bit more of a premium for it because, again, they have to fly down there and make sure that everything is, copacetic.
I have two things. One, it says I eat chocolate periodically, and that's periodically.
Yeah, exactly.
And people say death by chocolate, can you literally die?
Oh, so death by chocolate, yeah. Can you die from chocolate? Well, technically, yes. You could drown in it if you inhaled it, things like that. But just eating like a normal amount now, you'd have to force feed someone chocolate so much that their stomach exploded or something, which I don't think most people would do that.
Did anybody see the Off the Mark cartoon in the newspaper? I think it was yesterday or today, and it was a picture of the Grim Reaper at the supermarket, and he had a shopping carriage. I think he was looking at a cell phone or something, and then it said death in the headline, and then somebody was texting him and it said buy chocolate.
That's pretty good. I'll have to check that out.
And come back.
How about you come up here and maybe you'll think of it while you help me with something real quick. All right. So to illustrate what happens is that, have you ever done origami?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to hand you this $5 bill. It's my lunch money, so I'll need it back. All right, so I'm going to take the $1 bill, and we're just going to fold it in half like that. Okay? Perfect. And then fold it in half one more time. And then one more time, just like that.
You did this all.
I know. I tried to make the folds nice and easy, but watch what happens, though, okay? So we're going to take the 5 and the 1. I'm going to have you hold out your hand like this for me, okay? And I'm going to put these in there and make a fist for me. And we're going to see if you're psychic. Did I pull out the 5 or the 1?
None.
No, I pulled out the 5 this time, right? But here's what happens, though, is that I pulled out the 5, but my students do this all the time. Do you guys do this where you fist bump?
Yeah.
Right? Because you can actually pass money, because now, what do you have?
What?
You have the 5, which means I actually have the 1 the whole time, right?
What?
Not anymore. I passed it to you. Because I'll bet that you didn't drink a big glass of milk out in the lobby before you walked in, right?
No.
See, I knew it, because it turns out that milk actually slows the absorption of $5 bills. So it wouldn't have worked if you had just had a big thing of milk. Awesome. All right, so to finish up, though, I do need to quiz you, because I am a teacher. That's what we do, right? And just like in my chemistry classes, I'm not sure if we actually covered all this material, so I hope you did the reading before you showed up today. But true or false? So, first off, chocolate's high in caffeine. No. False, right? High in theobromine, the chemical cousin of caffeine, but extremely low in caffeine, if it does have any at all. It depends on where they get the beans from and so forth. But very low levels of caffeine. What about this one? Chocolate causes acne.
False.
False. I mean, geeks like me have been studying this for years, and there's no relation between breakouts and chocolate consumption. So you have a breakout, it's okay, just eat some chocolate. It'll get better, right? What about this one? That chocolate causes migraines.
If you're known to have an allergy to it.
Okay, yeah, so there are chocolate allergies, which if you have a chocolate allergy, you definitely have my condolences. I had one woman come up to me and tell me that she gets blisters in her mouth and throat when she eats chocolate. And I was like, I am so sorry. And she's like, I still do it sometimes. I'm just like, really? She's like, it's worth it. I'm like, oh. So count your blessings that you don't get blisters in your mouth when you eat chocolate. But it turns out that many people who claim to be sensitive to chocolate, they've actually done some double-blind studies with these where they've taken people who claim to be sensitive and they will give them pills, right? And some of the pills are just placebo, some actually contain, chocolate, dark chocolate. And they've actually found that as long as people don't know what they're consuming, that they found no correlation between the frequency or duration of migraines. And so, unless it is a true allergy, which is possible, oftentimes they believe that what's happening is that chocolate cravings are brought on by hormonal changes and stress levels. And migraines are often brought on by hormonal changes and stress levels. And so what happens is, you're under a lot of stress, and so you suddenly start to crave chocolate, and you're like, oh, I shouldn't do it. And then you give in, right? And then you eat the chocolate, and then because you were under stress, you are triggering a migraine. And it was going to come along whether or not you ate the chocolate itself. So my wife will tell you that chocolate cures migraines. She's always like, oh, it's coming on, I need chocolate, and you should take the kids somewhere. I'm like, okay. All right, what about this one, that chocolate causes hyperactivity?
I heard that.
Yeah, this one's actually really fascinating. I get caught in this trap as well. They've looked at studies over the past 50 years. They've actually debunked the idea of a sugar rush, right? It turns out that back in the 60s, there was a big push for a certain diet, which included abstaining from a lot of sugar, and this sugar rush term was kind of coined. But they've actually done some really fascinating studies with this, where they took parents with small children, and they took the kids into another room, and they told half the parents, okay, we're giving your kids a bunch of sweets, and then they told the other half of the parents that they were giving them a glass of water. And then they brought all the kids and the parents into a big playroom, and then they actually did a couple of things. They watched how the parents interacted with their kids, and then they also looked at each of the parents fill out a very detailed questionnaire about activity levels and hyperactivity and so forth. And without fail, the parents who were told that their kids had been given sweets actually ranked their kids as much more hyper and excitable on every single question. And yet none of the kids had actually been given anything. And so it turns out that it's part of it is our expectation that we see Junior eating some sweets, and so we kind of expect that they're going to be hyper, and they are because they're kids, right? And then the other interesting thing is they found that while the researchers were watching the parents, they actually found that parents parent differently when their kids have been given sugar. That without fail, those parents who were told that their kids had been given sugar hovered more often, they corrected their kids more often, they raised their voices more often. And so it's kind of interesting that it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy, that you're at a party, someone's eating a bunch of cake or some chocolate or something, and so you're like, oh, he's going to get all hyper, and you're like, get down from there, stop it, Whereas the other half of the parents didn't expect that, and so they kind of just talked and chatted and didn't worry so much about what their kids were doing. So kind of an interesting idea. Now, there has been some debatable research about, I shouldn't say debatable, I should say it hasn't been strongly confirmed, but linking things like the artificial colors and so forth to things like ADHD and so forth. So it could be the colorful candy shell and not necessarily the chocolate and the sugar inside that's causing this. So you guys passed. That's pretty good. So before we actually eat a little bit of chocolate, I will just mention that this is how the foodie people will tell you to eat chocolate. I do not personally do this. I just eat the chocolate. But this is how they say to really indulge all of your senses, First they say it has to be at room temperature, which it does bring up one good point, that if you do freeze your chocolate, you've probably noticed that it gets this white stuff on it sometimes called bloom. It's where it's not like freezer burn or mold or anything like that. It's where as you lower the temperature, you're actually getting the sugar to kind of crystallize out of the chocolate. And then sometimes you get oxidation and so forth with it if it's really old. But it's not harmful. It's not bad for you. It really is, the foodie people will be like, I cannot look upon it. Take it away, right? Personally, I just melt it down, throw in some craisins or something. Oh, yeah, that's good stuff, right? But, the foodie people don't like that.
Isn't it true that if you freeze it, you don't extend its life, which is why most people freeze it?
Yeah, you don't really extend the life. Chocolate can last for a long time, just on its own. It does have like a best by or a sell by date on there, but it never lasts that long in my house. But yeah, what happens though is it does start to get this bloom, whether it's in the fridge or wherever it is, and it changes the texture of it. And most people don't kind of like that new texture where it's like crumbly and crunchy at the same time. But it's still safe to eat and so forth. But yeah.
I have a question. Is there any benefit to like that unsweetened cocoa powder, making hot chocolate maybe a little stevia, no sugar? Is there any vitamin K in there?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely so if you make your hot chocolate with just like the baking cocoa versus something like Hershey's syrup or something like that, you definitely do avoid a lot of the sugar, which is probably a good thing. I mean, just from calories, we eat far too much, sugar in our diets nowadays. But yeah, I mean, making it with like baking cocoa is always a good choice. And it tastes delicious too. I think it tastes better when it's like the nice, unsweetened cocoa, but that's just me personally. Any other questions for me? All right, well, thank you so much for all of your time and attention. I'll stick around for a little bit if you have any other questions. You can come on up. All right, thank you.
If you'd like to try some of the techniques that there is in chocolate, we do have some of the chocolate in the back. Help yourself. We have milk chocolate on the left and dark chocolate on the right. I believe the dark chocolate is 70%.
Nice.
So if you want to give those a try and see
That's
if you
my
like the dark
personal
chocolate.
favorite.
Yeah.
It's my sweet spot.
Please help yourself. I would definitely try a little of each.
If we must.
Well, it's health food now, so.
But it was you could sample as many possible.
This is the milk, and this is the dark. Please take a little of each.
I